Hello, my name is Eric Putkonen. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm talking about living without regret. Regret, when I look it up in the dictionary, they'll talk about the emotion, it's negative emotion. It could be sorrow or whatever, but basically feeling bad about uh, decisions, actions, basically mistakes made, and wishing you could do it again or wishing you could have a redo. And a lot of people are actually very attached to their regrets. I've had people tell me it's impossible to live without regret. I've had people try to define being human in terms of having regret. I've had people, you know, some tell me they need regret. I'll get into that in a second. But it is very possible to live without regret. And there's a few, I guess, key points that I'm going to try to cover today regarding this. Um, First of all, let me just say that our actions and reactions arise from our current understanding or misunderstanding, as the case may be. So when we do things, we're doing them based on what we know. And like everything in life, we need to learn. We're not born masters. We need to figure it out and learn as we go, mostly through trial and error. We may find a book, or somebody might say something, and we might glean a little bit of wisdom if what was said isn't too far off from our current understanding, and we're able to make the leap, so to speak. And then we put it into practice and find out it was right. But so many of the time, if something is said or we read something, it's if it's not close enough to our current understanding, we'll dismiss it. Especially if it goes against what we want. If if the advice is against what we want, we tend to ignore it. I mean, how many things have our parents told us that we found out later was right? As children, we're like, no, I don't want that, or I know otherwise, and then we find out, yeah. And the reason being is a lot of times it might have been a situation they themselves had lived through at some point in their youth, and so they were trying to convey some wisdom, but we couldn't hear it. And that's often the case, is people can't hear it. They have to live it. They have to experience through trial and error directly and learn that way. Just like you can't really be told how to stand up and walk. It doesn't work that way. Toddlers have to keep trying. They have to keep getting up and trying to get up. And they will inevitably fall on their rump many, many times. That's part of the learning curve. Now, a lot of infants, a lot of times when they fall on their rump, will laugh or whatever, and then they just get right up and try again. They have yet to be conditioned and programmed by their adults, elders and betters, so to speak, that they should be holding their mistakes against themselves and treat themselves harshly for making a mistake. This is a learned behavior that gets worse the longer, a lot of times that we grow. And the older we get, the more we hold against ourselves minor issues. But due to this conditioning, that's where a lot of the regret arises, because we simply can't let go. What is a regret other than holding on to the past? Due to some action or decision or whatever, things didn't turn out the way you thought, or maybe it did turn out the way you thought, but then you didn't like the consequences that came afterward, or whatever. But in some way, you saw that, hey, that wasn't the right call. And so now you regret the decision, and instead you want to feel bad about it. And some people want to feel bad about it because in part of their conditioning, they feel they should be punished. You should feel bad for doing the wrong thing. And that is a strange thing, I think. to have that viewpoint of you should self-punish for any mistake. I mean, if we had that mentality when we tried to learn to walk or ride a bike, I seriously doubt many of us would be riding bikes, and some of us may never have learned to walk because we'd be busy holding against ourselves every mistake we ever made while we tried to learn, and we would have gave up after enough mistakes piled up. But that isn't the way you necessarily have to see things. There's a change in viewpoint that's possible. I find some business people have this the kind of the viewpoint I'm talking about. I can't remember what book it was, but it was some fairly well-known businessman who had made a successful business. And he mentioned that he had gone bankrupt like 8 or 9 times and had many failed businesses. And he said, well, all those failures were necessary for him to figure out how to run a successful business. He had learned that you need to make these mistakes in order to be able to really do well. If he didn't make any of those mistakes, he would have never had a really successful business, because it was all trial and error. He has to learn all the fine points. And so he didn't hold any of the failed businesses or bankruptcies against himself. There was no regret for any of the prior businesses, problems, whatever. In the end, the final success was, I learned how to finally do this, and so everything prior culminated. Now, funny enough, that is a way you could see things. Now, this was a non-spiritual person who had this viewpoint, and it's far more rational and sane, I think, to realize you're not a master of life at birth. And so, as we're doing things, we're going to make missteps. We're going to fall. We're going to cause damage. It's just going to happen. And perhaps we haven't gotten to the point of mastery yet. And so we're on the curve somewhere else, and instead of saying, "Hey, I'm on my way to getting to figuring this out," instead we may want to quit, or we're getting bogged down by all the emotional baggage we're carrying for every misstep and mistake we have made in the past. It becomes really hard to then move forward. I mean, think about the businessman. If he held every bankruptcy against himself, at some point he'd just quit making businesses. He'd just go, this isn't worth it anymore. I'm going to give up. And funny enough, a lot of people are like that. Not only in business, but life in general. They give up because they get to the point where they're afraid of making any further mistakes. And once you're afraid of making mistakes, you've basically cut off progression and learning. Because again, most of our learning is through trial and error. And if you're not willing to take error, you're not going to take the trials. And so trial and error is impossible. So there's this way of seeing the world differently, of understanding that this is the road of mastery, and part of mastery is making mistakes, and knowing that eventually it will be mastered. And so not holding all the prior missteps against yourself and treating yourself harshly because of it. So I mean, it is a different viewpoint, but it's also a matter of not trying to hold on to the past. I mean, regret is an attachment to the past. Well, we can't do anything about the past. What's done is done. And holding on to it and drudging it up and making ourselves suffer and punishing ourselves for it isn't going to change a thing. All we can do is simply learn, we now have a deeper understanding, perhaps, due to what we learned from the experience, and now we can move on from there. All action and reaction arises from our understanding at that point in time. Now, when I say this, it could be understanding also includes misunderstanding and ignorance. So, you could also say action and reaction arises from our misunderstanding and ignorance, as the case may be. And so, whatever we did because of our understanding at that point in time. If someone else had your background, if someone else had the exact same understanding, they would have done exactly the exact same thing. Because they didn't know, just like you didn't know. And so to basically hold it against yourself, because now you do know, the whole idea of regret is that there's this 20/20 understanding. It's like, now I know, and looking back, I could see that was the wrong decision. It was a misstep, mistake to do it that way. Whatever the case may be. And now that the understanding has changed, we're retroactively holding it against ourselves for past action. That is kind of like someone who, let's say an infant that finally learns to walk, and then from that point on holds it against themselves for every fall in the rump they had. Or the businessman who now has a successful business but constantly goes on and on about all the bankruptcies and failed businesses he's had in the past. It's totally overlooking that all of that was necessary to get to the point of learning how to walk or run a successful business or whatever it is. To finally get to mastery required all the stuff prior. Mastery does not just magically appear. Understanding through trial and error does not mean you're just automatically going to know the right way to do things. And so knowing that, someone else with the same understanding would have done the same action, and you could really not have done otherwise because your current understanding at that time is what caused or basically made you make the decision you made. Now, judging yourself based on a different understanding is a little unfair. The very fact that there is a regret means that you have learned. Understanding is different. And because your understanding is different, you would not do what you did prior. Instead of simply letting the past go and trusting that now you know better, and you would basically do different if the same situation arises again. And some situations do repeat in life, and so another opportunity may come up later where you could demonstrate what you've learned later. But instead of just moving on, we hold the past, saying I should have never made those mistakes in the first place, which is unrealistic. And so, with this combination of viewpoint of holding yourself, for not knowing, I should have been a master in the first place, and then having this conditioned, perhaps, idea that I should be punished in some way for mistakes, and so suffering is a good thing. It just kind of all balls together in a really strange way. But it doesn't have to be that way. It is quite possible to let yourself off, so to speak. Realize that was a misstep at that point in time on the way of learning to walk. And maybe you're not quite walking yet, or not walking well. But you have to basically keep trying, and the odds are you're probably going to make another mistake. And being okay with that. I know some people like holding on to all the consequences and really beating themselves up for it. Because some mistakes have caused damage. Some mistakes might even cost somebody their life. But then to hold it against yourself for the rest of your own, I think is a mistake. Because you didn't know. If you knew otherwise, you would have done different. It's part of the learning curve. And even if you try to hold on to the past, it's not like you can change it. What's done is done. You can only move on from there. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do going forward? That's all you can do. And if you want to try to make up for the mistake or harm, that's fine. Try to make amends. But there's no reason to beat yourself up for it. There's no reason to hold on to the wish of, I wish I could have done different in the past. Because that is all pointless. It's futile. No matter how much you regret what you did, it's done, and it can't be otherwise at this point. But if you want to make amends, that's fine. It doesn't have to arise from regret. I mean, if you did something, and let's say you hurt a friend, you can go back and apologize. You can go back and try to heal the wound. You can go back and try to fix, more or less out of concern and compassion, and trying to seeing damage and then fixing it. But there's no reason to try to hold on to that past action and carry that the rest of your life as a regret, something to just gnaw at you from that point on. It's not necessary. It's not needed. No matter how much someone might think they should be punished for it, they actually know better now. If anything, pity those who make a misstep and then still don't realize it's a misstep. Pity those that made a mistake and they didn't see it as a mistake, because they're bound to make that same mistake again and again and again. So that is, I would say, far worse. So let go of the regret. The regret serves no purpose. The fact that your understanding has changed and is different now is the important thing. You know otherwise, and so won't make that misstep again. And it's a misstep on the way to later mastery. So, anyways, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit today. Got a little long-winded there. But if you have any questions, comments, whatever, post below. Please subscribe to my channel. Also, please share the video if you think anybody might want to listen to it as well. But thank you much.